Hello again everyone, and thank you for clicking on this video. I hope you've been learning a lot of new, revealing, and exciting information from my videos. This video sort of falls in line with the other videos that I've been producing, which deal with Europeans of color. However, in this video, I will be covering Asian people of color. One of the big reasons that I'm venturing away from Europeans for now is I keep seeing videos on YouTube and Instagram regarding Asian people and their reactions to people of color, especially as it pertains to people most commonly described as Black people. So let's dive in. The name of this video, as you can see, is Dark-Skinned Asian People. Now I know the titles I choose for my videos are not very sexy, but that's how I like my research, straight up and to the point. Alright, so I know some of you have seen some of these titles on YouTube, like Chinese meet Black people for first time, What do Chinese think of Black people? Small town Korean woman meets her first Black person, What Japanese people think of Black people, Being dark-skinned in the Philippines. Well, let me let you in on a secret. Asian people were dark-skinned, or aka Black people, in the recent past. And obviously, there are still many Asian countries that have large numbers of brown or dark-skinned people. I'm mostly going to show you the Asian people that do not know or do not want to know that they are directly related to past relatives that were all dark-skinned. These ethnicities are Chinese, Korean, Filipino, and Japanese people. This is Professor Li Jin of Fudan University in Shanghai. I saw a very interesting video featuring him on YouTube. I highly suggest you check it out. I'm going to place a link to that video in the description area. One of China's leading geneticists confirms that all Chinese people can trace their genetic lineage back to Africa. What's interesting is that he originally set out to prove that Chinese people independently evolved, but the evidence forced him to change his position and admit the truth. I'm not sure if this information comes as a shock to you. I was somewhat shocked that it was actually revealed, although after watching this video, it should be somewhat obvious to you. Alright, so just as a disclaimer, the following photographic evidence has been gathered from sources like the Library of Congress online, Google Images, Pinterest, and Getty Images. Alright, so check out this video, and this is of the late Qing Dynasty, which was approximately 150 years ago. As you can see, this appears to be a man and his wife, Qing nobility. You can also see that the woman's face is painted with a white paint or cream. Very common in China, Korea, and Japan during this time period. You can also see that the man's complexion is very dark. No doubt her face was dark as well. So let me veer off for a minute and talk about why women painted their faces. There are several similar theories, but this explanation from reference.com sums it up pretty good. Alright, so that reference goes on to read, pale skin is a long coveted sign of beauty in China, and skin whitening is an 18 billion a year industry in Asia. Although there are many modern companies competing in the industry, skin whitening is a tradition that dates back to the Han Dynasty. Traditionally, farmers and laborers had tan skin, so upper classes donned white face makeup to display their status. The association between fair skin and wealthy remains today. During the Sui and Tang dynasties, women applied red lipstick and white powder to their faces to have a pure white facial appearance. This look is no longer common on the streets, but it still can be seen in Chinese opera. In modern China, many women keep their skin light by liberally applying sunscreen, using umbrellas on sunny days, and wearing face masks at the beach. Skin lightening is also common. In a recent survey, 40% of women in China, Korea, the Philippines, and Taiwan said they have used skin lightener in the past year. Dermatologists offer facial peels and laser treatments which aim to lighten the skin. In addition, there are many pills and herbal concoctions on the market which promise to help lighten the skin. Such companies have received criticism for their unsubstantiated claims and potential health risks. Hey, did you catch when I read traditionally farmers and laborers had tan skin? Alluding to the assumption that these farmers and laborers actually had light skin and they only got tan from the sun. The author is obviously showing his or her ignorance or bigotry. Well, we are going to see that it is not the case at all. These folks had natural dark skin. Alright, so let's check out some more of these photos. If I'm going too fast, feel free to stop the video and take a closer look. This photo is from 1888. Check out the complexion on the man standing up. Yeah, not a tan. Some of these photos tend to be blown out. meaning the exposure setting was too high, causing some of the men closer to the camera flash to appear lighter than they really are. That seems to be the case with many of these old photos, so just keep that in mind as you're looking at different photos, not only from this video, but from other videos and sources online. Okay, so these two photos show a Manchu soldier and a Qing Dynasty soldier. I zoomed in on their faces. They have very dark complexions, but are typical of soldiers of that era. Here is another photo showing Chinese men and boys. Again, very dark complexions, very common for those times. Here's an interesting photo of an extremely tall man with other men all sporting dark complexions. I zoomed in on a couple. Now in this photo, there are several Chinese men. I circled the obvious, but as I said before, these photos are often shown with high exposure levels, although the men to the right do seem to have significantly lighter complexions. Alright, I really like this photo because it shows so many of the typical Chinese soldiers of that time period, many who probably had relatives alive today. Again, go ahead and stop the video and take a really close look. Alright, so this photo was taken during the time of the Boxer Rebellion, as many of these photos were. The year 1900 was really not that long ago. Alright, so I'm not going to comment on this one. It pretty much speaks for itself. Okay, so now here's a photo of two traditional Japanese men from circa 1868. They obviously had dark skin. One man seems to be subservient to the other. This photo is of a Japanese samurai. This photo is showing a Japanese soldier having executed 3 Chinese men. I'm sure many of you know that Japan invaded China in 1937 and fighting and occupation continued until 1945. Again, here are typical Japanese people in the early 1900s. These photos were obviously staged by the photographer giving a glimpse of life in Japan at that time. This photo is of Japanese men and women. Check out these Japanese children and their complexions. Here's a photo of a temple procession in Japan according to the caption, and apparently photographing these events was prohibited. Again, just like the Chinese Qing Dynasty procession I showed you previously, all if not most of these men are very dark-skinned. I do realize this photo is not of the greatest quality. However, I hope you're getting some sense of what I'm trying to show you. Okay, so these next 2 photos are of the Ainu people. They are supposed to be indigenous to Japan. You can probably notice that they have different features than the typical Japanese we are used to seeing today. Again, look at the texture of their hair, not really straight, but more bushy. Now this print is from the Library of Congress called Blossom Time Tokyo, showing Japanese women and children. Obviously you can see the skin color on these Japanese is a medium brown. There was no date on this, but it appears to be from circa 1950s. Here we can see a Manchu woman with 2 young girls helping to dress her. She is wearing face paint covering her complexion. In this photo we can see multiple Chinese people. I focused in on the 2 women in the middle. One has face paint and one doesn't. In this photo you can see several Chinese women. A couple of them don't have their faces painted. Now we are looking at another Chinese family. And here are more Chinese women. Here you can see a Korean woman of some nobility or wealth being carried by 2 Korean men. Now here's a different group. These are Taiwanese Aboriginals from Formosa. Take a look at these people. Now if you think about Taiwan today, do they look like these Aboriginals? For the most part, I say no. Now, as in many countries, the true Aboriginals are not featured, supported, and spoken about. They are often poor and forgotten. Also, what occurs is a mixture of Aboriginals and foreign occupiers procreating to produce different-looking populations. What I'm suggesting is that the Taiwanese decided, like in many parts of Asia, to ostracize the dark-skinned individuals and to advocate for marrying lighter-skinned people, thereby slowly creating a lighter-skinned population over time. For those that are maintaining some melanin in their skin bleaching is the method they are choosing to fit into society. Here are several children playing or practicing acrobatics. Now here's another Asian group of people in the Philippines, circa 1920s. They appear to be conducting a ceremonial procession. I see that the woman they are carrying has a noticeably lighter complexion. So again, this veneration of lighter skin has also infected the Philippines. I apologize for jumping around from culture to culture or ethnicity to ethnicity. I thought it'd be much more interesting that way. Anyway, as the caption says, these are Korean men. One thing that is distinctive about Korean men is the type of wide-brimmed black hat worn at this time in Korea. Here are more Korean men at the turn of the century. Alright, I really like this photograph of this Fucha woman from Fujian province, Japan. She reminds me of an AKA black woman that I know who has very similar features. Here are two Fucha women that appear to be nurses. I really love that there has been photographic evidence that has been shared. It makes it a lot easier to prove my point. Unlike when I am creating videos on Europeans of color, I know there is a lot of photographic evidence, etc., but it will probably never see the light of day. We can often only find descriptions written in books. Okay, so here we can see a Vietnamese orphanage from the late 1800s. You will notice a range of complexions and also some white children, probably missionaries' kids. Here's a group of Aboriginal Montagnard people from Vietnam. I remember reading about some of them aligning with the US forces against the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War, although never did they mention their very dark complexions. So here's a photo of a young girl from Lao Cai, North Vietnam. Not what you think of regarding people of North Vietnam today. The people they show on TV today are very pale in complexion. Unfortunately, I believe the original people have been mixed and pushed towards valuing lighter skin. Alright, here's a young Cambodian soldier. Check out his deep, swarthy complexion. Here are some more young male Cambodian soldiers. Here again are some more young Cambodian men. Their complexions are even deeper and swarthier than the two previous photos. This was an interesting photo. This was labeled as a Cambodian aristocratic boy, basically meaning his family had some wealth. In this photo, you can see the French soldiers surrounding the King of Cambodia during the mid-1940s. Of course, the French colonized and occupied Cambodia for many years. All right, so going back to the Philippines.